Yes, so if I'm not mistaken, we are on in Perak Aleph, Pasuk Lamed Bet, so chapter 1, verse 32. Someone confessed? Yes? You weren't here. Okay, so I'll just presume this is it. Oh, it's okay. So we had just finished that Bathsheba had come to David HaMelech, and she was distraught over Adoniah attempting to usurp the kingship from Shlomo, whom he had promised was going to be the next king. And Adoniah tried to gather some Kohanim and some followers and tried to basically run a third-party campaign. But in his case it didn't work because he wasn't approved of or qualified. He didn't call. It was an illegitimate process. Tzadok, the Kohen Gadol, wasn't invited. Nobody from the house of David knew about it. And so David promised Bathsheba that only Shlomo, her son, was going to be the next king. And then she thanks him, may my master, the King David, live forever. That's where we left off. So we're on, so again, Pasuk Lamed Bet. I have the Sefer here. I can fill in any blanks that we're missing because it's really hard to photocopy. It is what it is. Okay. Anyone who would like to read or to attempt is more than welcome to. Thank you, Adam, for volunteering. Yeah, but you can read it in English, just I mean, I understand Hebrew, but I don't care. Huh? Okay.
King David then said, summon Tzadok the Kohen, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah ben Yehuda, and they came before the king.
I mean, you guys want to read the Hebrew? I'm fine with it, as long as everyone understands it. If you don't, then I don't want anybody to feel bad about not understanding it. Okay, yeah, so they're basically calling everybody who was supposed to be called, meaning the most important people in his kingdom, who were supposed to be summoned by, let's say, the coronation of the next king, and they failed, Adoniah failed to call them. So what David is going to do is to do an official coronation that's beyond doubt and leave no room for misunderstanding. Okay, so go ahead.
The king is like the king.
The king said to them,
the king said to them, take with you your master's servants, and not my son, what is that?
Solomon, Shlomo,
upon a mule, and take him down to Gihon.
Right, Gihon, the name of the place. So why on a mule, by the way, if you know, there's an expression of David and Amos who describes Mashiach as Ani v'rochem al hamor, as poor and riding on a donkey, which is to say, sounds from the Gemara like there's a situation in which the Mashiach is anointed out of a situation of poverty and despair, and so Hamor would be the poorest of the poor man's form of locomotion, as opposed to him riding on a fancy white horse would be much more expensive. Rosabato once said in Shiva, said, in prophetic terms, the symbolism is what it is, but this would be like saying that either Mashiach comes in a Lamborghini or in a Fiat. It's just a function of the generation and the merit that we have. But it's interesting that David does say that he should ride on his mule. He probably did have fancier animals to put him on. Okay.
There Tzadok the Kohen and Nathan the prophet shall anoint him as king over Israel, sound the shofar, and proclaim, long live King Shlomo. Then come back up after him and said,
But let him come.
And let him come and sit upon my throne, and he shall reign my place. For
It is he.
For it is he whom I have commanded to become ruler over Israel and Judah.
Right. Which, by the way, is also a very prophetic thing that he's saying, because Israel and Yehuda are ultimately going to become two different kingdoms. Fascinating feature of the Malchut that we, even from David HaMelech, even when it was supposed to be relatively clear, unequivocally clear, that there's only one royal family, that he's the only one who can, his descendants are the only ones who are eligible to rule, it's constantly questioned or in doubt who's going to be the next king. And even after it's clear to Shlomo HaMelech that he wants, obviously, his legitimate son to be the next king, by then the kingdom of Israel had already decided to break off. There was effectively a civil war, and they decided they're going to have their own kingdom. So even when it seemed like it was clear that at least we've got two kings in a row from the same family, 3 generations didn't happen without some kind of conflict. And there's something very interesting about Malchut, where you would think, once you have a king, he basically sets everything into order. The reality is that the entire Sefer, Ramash from beginning to end, is one big question over who's going to rule next, who's more qualified, why, who's from the family, etc., who deserve it, doesn't deserve it. But that David already tells him that you're going to rule over Yisrael and Yehuda is basically a half prophecy that those are ultimately going to become 2 separate kingdoms in his time, by the way. That happens in the lifetime of Shlomo HaMelech. The kingdom splits up. Just.
The man, son of Yeshua, answered the king, saying, Amen.
Son of Yehoiada.
Oh, sorry. And may Hashem God, my Lord, the king, say, just as Hashem was with the king, so may he be with Solomon.
It was just like Hashem was with my Lord.
With my Lord.
Meaning you, the king.
So may he be with Solomon and make his throne even
greater, sorry.
Greater than the throne of my Lord from David.
Right. Does that sound like a nice thing to say to somebody? I hope your son's throne is even greater than yours. No, it's fascinating. Rashi says from here, the Gemara points out, right? Right. We perceive this to be a blessing, that we always hope and pray that our children will be more successful than we are. It's not a slight, it's not an insult. There's a degree of pride that you can take in having successful, intelligent children. So Rashi says, the Gemara proves from here, this is the pasuk that the Gemara quotes when it says, there's no insult, there's no offense, en adam mitqaneh bibno, is the expression in the Gemara. That no normal man envies his son. If your son or your daughter is even more, wealthier, more intelligent, more successful than you, you have nothing but pride, nothing but happiness. Some of the few people alive that you actually never have competition with. Not in a normal relationship anyway.
It still seems like a weird thing to tell a king. It's more like...
he's at the end of his life. He's not going to achieve much more than he currently has, which sounds kind of morbid, but I guess it's true.
Right. I don't know, I just kind of refrain
from making reference to his death and all right. Well, if you wanna back out a little bit for a bigger perspective, these are the 3 most loyal people to him who stuck with him throughout everything. There were a few other people who were killed in the meantime, and he's actually, we'll see in just a little bit, he's going to give Shlomo some interesting instructions as to what to do once he passes away, because he had sworn to these people that he wasn't going to harm them. He was kind of tricked into it, but he did. So, the people who are most loyal to him and the closest to him, he doesn't feel bad about telling them or hearing such a thing from them, which they basically wish for him what he would be wishing for himself, which is, I hope that his throne is even greater than mine. Also, don't forget that it took him a really long time to establish himself. Yeah, and it's interesting. That's the way I can tell you, growing up here in America, that most families that immigrated to the U.S. came relatively poor, or at least they came from very difficult situations of oppression, whatever country they were living in. And then normally it was difficult to get here, difficult to get a visa, and the second generation got established, they went to high school, and third generation they went to college or even got a graduate degree. So David suffered through the first quite a number of years before Shaul pretty much died. He never acknowledged that he was the legitimate heir to the throne, and David, by the time he got established, his life was relatively short. He died, he was 70 years old. So, probably above the average lifespan of the time. But it was a relatively, it could have been a much longer reign, we'll put it that way. So to say that Shlomo's reign should be greater than his, Shlomo at this point is about 13 years old. He's not very old at all. And so he has a much easier transition. David had to fight for it. In Shlomo's case, he basically, aside from this particular incident with Adoniah, he's hoping this transition goes smoothly and that his son can accomplish more than him. By the way, are you also, just to dig back a little bit into Sefer Shemuel, Don't forget that David was also rejected when he submitted his proposal to build Beit HaMikdash. So he knows that Shlomo is going to accomplish something that he can't. When he tried, the response that he got from Hashem was that your hands are megoalot bedam, which we can read either redeemed or somewhat covered in blood, meaning you waged wars. It's inappropriate for what we call the house of life, the Beit HaMikdash, that achieves atonement and forgiveness for us and ultimately extends our life and the quality of it. It's inappropriate that it should be built by someone who still had to wage wars. The country hadn't entirely been conquered until then. So he purchased from the Chittim the land on which Har Bayit stands. That was a purchase, right? Famous midrash it appears in a few places, but among them in Vayeshev and Vayechi, that there are 3 places in all of Eretz Yisrael the Goyim cannot possibly say that we stole, right? And those are Hebron, Shechem, and East Yerushalayim. Like the 3 places that are most heavily occupied by Arabs, and that the UN and UNESCO continue week after week. They publish more idiotic condemnations of Israel and denials of our historical right to these places. Ironically, these 3 places were all purchased with money. That's what the Midrash is trying to say. Yaakov purchased Shechem for 100 kesita from the Chittim. David HaMelech purchased Har Bayit from the Chittim, same people. And Hebron was bought by Abraham from Ephron HaChiti. They were apparently very big in real estate, the Chittim, when they were just there before anybody else was. Also for 400 shekel. So the Torah is our receipt. We know that these purchases took place. We know that no one can contest this, and yet they do. But that's just what they do. So he purchased the land for Beit HaMikdash. As long as he lives, it won't be built. Because as long as he lives, he's the king. So in effect, he's almost preventing it from being built. I'm not saying we should pray that he should die, but as long as he lives, he knows that the next step won't be taken. So it's not such a big insult to him.
Isn't it sort of weird though? I mean, like we're all about people changing and having, like, overcome certain things. So for Hashem to say that, like, there's nothing they can do, the Beit HaMikdash will not be built.
If he had a get out of jail free card, I think he kind of spent it with Batsheva. I don't know that I could. It's pure conjecture to say that maybe that was something that he could or couldn't undo. We have halachot like this. We have halachot, for example, that a kohen who killed someone, and apparently even if it's a mitzvah, like Bat Pinchas, should no longer for the rest of his life do Nesiat Kapayim. He doesn't do Birkat Kohanim, which by the Sephardi means like every day he should be doing this, and he doesn't. So it's because the same bracha that's associated with peace is not supposed to come from, because they raise their hands when they do Birkat Kohanim. So he's not supposed to lift his hands literally for Birkat Kohanim having killed someone. So it may be that even if what happened with Batsheva didn't happen, or if it happened, let's say, at a more appropriate time, under more appropriate circumstances, he still might have been refused, the right to build Beit HaMikdash. It seems like it couldn't have been built without the land having been fully conquered and properly settled. He purchased the place of Har Bayit instead of conquering it, which is funny because looking back, probably could have very easily conquered it from the Chittim, and then people would have said, you conquered it, give it back, or we're taking it back, or it's not yours. He was wise enough to make a purchase that endures. But it could be that he had no power to overturn that decree, which is interesting. By Batsheva, he prays, he repents, he turns the world inside out. He wrote quite a number of chapters of Tehillim on that topic, and his repentance and his regret for having done it. He doesn't fight Hashem's response. This is just not it's not going to be done by you. But he promises him that his son will do it. So I guess he kind of made peace with his accomplishments. He realizes it's time for him to move on. But I don't know that he had the power or the authority to attempt to overturn that. It's very interesting. The thought, is an intelligent one in the sense that very often you find there's an expression like this at the very end of Masechet Nazir. The Gemara says that Masechet Sotah. Sorry, the end of Masechet Sotah. The Gemara says that such is life, that the real heroes die in war, and the cowards write the chronicles of it. You know, so who are the real heroes? The heroes are the ones who gave their lives, who sacrificed themselves, who no longer have a story to tell, and who writes the story of how the war took place? And the guys who are in the back who survived thanks to them. So Moshe Rabbeinu, whose entire life is about Eretz Yisrael, is refused entry, refused access to Eretz Yisrael. He has refused a visa. David HaMelech, whose whole purpose is singing praise of Hashem, like they sang praise of Hashem in Beit HaMikdash, you would think that this would be like the grand opera house of singing praise to Hashem on a daily basis, and then ironically he's not able to do it. So there's one of two ways of looking at this. I remember a discussion I had once with my grandmother, Aliyah Shalom, and her brother Tzemach, my great uncle, Aliyah Shalom, who my grandmother was saying how she remembers some of her great aunts and some of her relatives, and how observant they were in Morocco, and how life was just, it was simple. It was clear to everybody that we observe the Torah, we observe the mitzvot. Nobody asked any questions. She said, how could it be that these tzaddikim never merited to come to Israel? And she's saying, my generation, already she was saying, no, my generation. Who are we? We spoke French. We didn't learn as much as they did. And she's saying, we came to Israel, like we had the zechut that they didn't have. So my uncle Samach said, it's because of tzaddikim like that we had the zechut to enter the land. What we did with it afterwards is our problem. It's not their fault. They gave us the best education they could. So Moshe, his entire life, it's let's say a little bit simplistic to say that his whole life is about the challenge, the ultimate goal of reaching Eretz Yisrael. His real purpose was bringing the entire nation to Eretz Yisrael. So he himself couldn't go, but his mission was fulfilled, and then he got everybody else to go. David HaMelech, if his job was only to sing praises of Hashem, he could have written Tehillim quietly and then revealed it posthumously. No, he reveals to us Sefer Tehillim because his goal is to teach the entire nation how to praise Hashem, how to repent, how to do teshuvah, how to thank Hashem, how to appeal to Hashem when you're in trouble, when you're worried, when you're being attacked, etc., when you're in danger. So, in a way, he's the precursor of Beit HaMikdash. True, he didn't technically construct it himself, but it's really on his shoulders that everything else happened. Which, by the way, we're going to see. When Shlomo does build Beit HaMikdash, and they try to open the gates, there's a bit of a miraculous scene there where the gates don't open until he literally mentions, which is, by the way, what we say before we open the Hechal. That's where the pasuk comes from. So the Gemara says that to prove to everyone still alive that David was forgiven for what happened with Bathsheba, and that no one should think that this was the disaster that derailed his career, that until Shlomo asked in the honor of his father, the gates wouldn't open. So to prove to everyone that David really was the one thanks to whom Beit HaMikdash was constructed, and thanks to whom we were granted entry, Hashem made an extra point of it. So, we move on. Things get colorful here. It's an election year. I thought this was a very appropriate sefer to be learning political wars are waging.
So it's not the con and the prophet and Benaiah son of
Yehuda.
And the archers and the soldiers went down the Mount of Solomon upon and led the people to Yochel.
King David's mule. Let him to Gichon. Horn of oil.
Horn of oil from the tent, and he anointed Solomon to be son of the shofar.
And all the people proclaimed.
And all the people proclaimed, long live Solomon. All the people
Then ascended.
After him, the people were playing flutes and rejoicing with
Great joy.
great joy. The crowd virtually burst from their eyes.
Right, so there was a big celebration, and instead of squashing, by the way, there's a very powerful message here. If you think about this, what is the most effective way to counter someone who challenges the throne and who's trying to usurp the kingship? So they would say, listen, I'm the king. Even if this is my son, I would quell the rebellion, kill everyone who participated, hang them up for a few days. I mean, this is what emperors and psychopaths do all over the world. There's a very deep concept behind what David HaMelech did, which is basically, he defeated them with simcha. No. He convened the right people. He got the wheels into motion. They were singing, they blew the shofar, they anointed him with oil. Everybody comes to celebrate. And he drowns them out, not by attacking them, attacking their character, attacking their plan, trying to expose their wickedness to the rest of the world. He drowns them out by ignoring them, by creating such a simcha that they are not a part of, that they themselves are petrified. You're going to see in a little bit. You would think, we tried. It's a rebellion. At the end of the day, if we lose, we lose, and probably we expect to die. But at least it was worth our shot, our day in the sun. That's not what he did. There's a very deep mystical concept behind the strategies with which we deal with Yetzer Hara, we deal with unfortunate circumstances or difficult situations. Sometimes you address something directly. So someone does something inappropriate, says something inappropriate, someone attacks you, you attack back. It's what it is, you have to defend yourself. Sometimes certain forms of evil are best not dealt with. In other words, they're best left alone or attacked indirectly. And there are a couple of really good examples of this. Probably the best one, and the one that I've heard most often quoted in this context, is depression. Depression. The more you treat a depression directly, the more you pamper it, the more you negotiate with it, the more you try to engage it, the more legitimacy you lend it. It's a concept. If you'd like to go over the Zohar with me, you're welcome to. It's a very, very powerful concept. I'll give you a funny example of this, but it's an election year, so I don't care. In Israel, after the founding of the state, 1948, there's a UN resolution, right? The one and only UN resolution that ever made sense or ever did any good for anyone. They passed a resolution that Israel should be an independent Jewish state. The Arabs never accepted this resolution. They never accepted the UN partition of Israel, where the West Bank was part of Jordan, which used to be Cisjordan. Now it's Jordan. And the Arabs negotiated. No, that's really what they called it. The word cis is very popular. Right? So the cisgender Jordanians were never happy with this arrangement between Israel and the rest of the world versus them and Syria for that matter. And so naturally they resented it and they attacked from the very beginning. Since the founding of the State of Israel, the Arabs and their sympathizers have always called for dismantling the entire state, for demanding everything, for throwing the Jews out, pushing them into the sea. And for years we had it right. We had a good strategy, which was just ignore them. Don't engage them, don't discuss with them. Nothing you do is going to appease them because they hate you. They hate you. And let's be honest, there's some Sephardim here, right? They've always hated us, as the Meir Kahana used to like to point out. Arab anti-Semitism didn't start in May of 1948, right? We have a long, glorious history of anti-Semitism, which began with the massacre of entire towns and cities in the Arabian Crescent, the Arabian Peninsula. Medina is one great example. Khaybar is another. They have a saying like this, like a quick line they like to say every time they want to massacre the Jews. So, as long as we ignored them, much of the rest of the world ignored them too. Once the left in Israel came up with a brilliant idea of giving them seats in the parliament and refusing to prosecute them for what's ultimately treason and for acting against the country in which they were living and who provides them with all their social and infrastructural services, then we began to give them legitimacy and to give legitimacy to their crazy opinions. Right? Crazy is the only way to put it. So now you have parties within the Knesset whose sworn purpose is to dismantle the Knesset, right? Which makes it difficult. Not that parliamentary democracy is easy anywhere in the world, but it makes it really difficult when you have a growing group of voices that need to be completely shut out, and that their only purpose is to disrupt you and to attack you and to disadvantage you and ultimately to erase you. So as long as we ignored them, we were fine. Now that we gave them seats in the Knesset and we said it's legitimate, and if a Jew were to do this back in the day, they would have tried him for high treason. Today, they get support from all over the world, and people look at them as like the only viable, legitimate political parties in the Knesset. And now you have a serious problem. You've effectively lent legitimacy to insanity. That makes it very difficult to deal with. I'm not saying, we had a discussion about this once, a very emotional one. I'm not saying that there is no such thing as depression. I'm saying that there's no such thing as depression. Okay? Like, even if someone were to clinically diagnose you with depression, it's a lie, because if you ignore it, focus on other things, build up some self-esteem and string together some successes, you won't be depressed. But if I define you as depressed, right? Or if you want a more modern example, if I define you and your entire existence as a homosexual, it really changes the way that you look at the world and the way the world looks at you. Okay? So your average heterosexual doesn't walk around broadcasting their sexuality to the rest of the world, because really nobody cares. Some people who work in the fashion industry do, including those way up in the Italian parliament, and our thoughts and prayers go out to them. But in the rest of in the civilized world, people tend not to focus so heavily on what's really just one aspect of life. Yes, it's true. Like a kindergartner, you can use bathroom words, and sex is a part of life. That's great, but really there are other things that you do. And so, no offense, but let's say go back to the example of the homosexual. So, my dear friend, the homosexual, do you not have the same joys and challenges that everyone else in the world has? You have to find a career, you have to find a parnasa, you have friends and family and ups and downs and health and, people coming and going. To define your entire existence by this one thing, right? Réducteur, we would say in France. This is really like, there's no greater insult to the soul. You're saying this is all you are. This is the only thing that matters, the only aspect of your life that amounts to anything. And everything that you do has to be defined by this, or filtered by it, or approved by it. Whereas our approach would be, listen, we all have our joys and challenges. We can choose to focus on them and allow them to define us, or we can focus on other things. Strive for accomplishment, achievement, and try to contribute positively to society. If you look at these TEDx talks and a lot of these inspirational, motivational speakers, many of whom are missing limbs, some of them are partially blind, some of them grew up with different learning disabilities, they all tell you, I had a choice. Either I let this define me and live the rest of my life as a handicapped, disabled individual, or I do as much as I can, and lo and behold, I can accomplish more than most people who don't have my problem. And that's a function of perspective and motivation. David Melech says, why would I execute my own son? Why would I start a scandal at the end of my life? Why do I want my kingship to culminate in this, to end in a war? Plus, who's to guarantee me that we're ever going to get out of this on the right side? If Abdullah attacks Shlomo, he's older, he's more experienced, he's got more friends, and more people of influence in his entourage. Maybe this ends the wrong way. So he says, no, we'll do this in a positive way. Your brother thinks he's the king. Then why is the Navi of the generation, the Kohen Gadol, the current king, and everyone else in the kingdom celebrating a coronation of someone else? Right? There's legitimate anointing oil being poured on his head. This is the real ceremony. And so very often, this is the solution to a problem. Do something positive, do it right, do it legitimately, for the right reasons, and you just drown out everything else. You dilute the insanity and the nonsense without even ever having to deal with it. Very interesting analog to this, that Rav Giat was telling me when I was learning Nikur, that there are a lot of different methods as to how to take the Nikur out. And the Gemara says you should use a separate knife. You should be very careful, you have to scrape and scratch and cut. So he taught me a totally different, this is the method of Rav Mahfoud, where he said, Chelev is best dealt with by not dealing with it. He's like, you cut here, here, and here, throw the whole pelvis away, and you're done. That's it. The story's over. Why do you have to get involved with it? Then it gets complicated. It starts falling to pieces. So there are lots of situations for which this is true. Anyhow, I'm just pointing that out. David could easily have squashed this, and Uriah Hitti, the erstwhile husband of Bathsheba, did refuse orders. He did kind of rebel against him, and him sending him, to the front lines of the war that was going on at the time never really sat well with him afterwards. It just came back to haunt him. So maybe he changed his approach a little bit.
So you're saying even from a psychoanalytic point of view, the therapist should be aware that the patient is depressed, but shouldn't tackle the patient during the test?
So first of all, absolutely. Absolutely. In what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, i.e. results-based psychology, the answer is absolutely. Here's a better question for you, right? The DEA is to the FARC like the therapist is the depression. Meaning, the Drug Enforcement Agency makes all of its money by catching people who distribute drugs. And so, as the great Milton Friedman once said, from a purely accounting perspective, the DEA, their job is to diminish the amount of, drugs coming into the country, or to augment the amount of drugs coming into the country. It's a very funny comment that he made, but it's true. If your therapist brought you to a situation where you have no depression, your therapist goes hungry. Right? The Daniels are great, but they don't pay the bills. So you have a lot of people, unfortunately, the mental health industry is riddled with people whose job is to make you dependent on them. We've talked about this socialist concept, and it will continue to haunt us for a long time. Because to make you independent is to make me as unnecessary in your life as anyone else. For me, to make my parnasa, I want you to depend on me forever. I want you to constantly come to me for help. I want you to feel incapable, ineffectual. You will always need to refer and relate back to me, and I charge you by the hour, or by the phone call, or by the whatever. Cognitive behavioral therapy would be, you start talking to me about how your mom treated you when you were little. No, we don't go there. I don't care. It doesn't matter. She could have been great. She could have been evil. It makes no difference. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? That's it. Focus on your goals. Focus on how to get there. Assess every so often, and then just concentrate on good things, and the bad things go away. If you're unemployed and you're in a funk and you're upset and you're drinking and you have all kinds of problems, they won't go away until you start doing good things. So cognitive behavioral therapy is very simple. It's like the beauty and simplicity. Really, I don't care what happened in the past. The question is, how do we build a better future? We have goals, we set reasonable ones, we move on, etc. If I were to tell you that I believe that you're depressed, for that matter, for me to tell a child that he has ADD is not necessarily a blessing. Some parents want to say, yeah, of course he should know because he learns differently and he shouldn't be frustrated, etc. It's a huge crutch. I can tell you maybe a little bit of Ritalin will help you focus, but if I allow that to define you, you're going to spend the rest of your life looking for exemptions and exceptions and not achieving. I can say, so up to a certain age, maybe it's better that we don't even refer to this. We don't even relate to it. We just make certain accommodations. And I don't want the kid to know that you're incapable of doing certain things. Maybe certain things are hard for you. Maybe we can learn how to learn them or learn how to deal with them. Maybe a little bit less homework, will bring you further. But to tell people that there's a reason they're not succeeding and they have what to blame is suicide. Absolute suicide.
So all of self-help, awareness of the problem is a perspective, so the problem doesn't apply to it.
First of all, you're probably aware of the problem. Second of all, even if you're not, your awareness of it isn't necessarily going to help you solve it. Your awareness of it might be like a vacuum sucking you back into it. So if I tell you that you suffer from clinical depression, maybe it's true. So you spend enough time thinking about this, you tell people, it's in your medical records, you have prescription medications that you have to go buy, etc. So half of your existence is about your clinical depression. If that is what defines you, and if that's what justifies your failures, and that's what makes you, in a way, kind of protects you from having to achieve and from being judged by other people, it's a horrible thing. It might be true, but it's a circumstance. It's not a definition of you. It's not a title for you to wear. That's true of everything. It's true of absolutely everything. Maybe it's true that. You want another example? Just because it's in the news right now. 1 second. There are white people who don't like black people. Right? There are. Some of them are known, some of them aren't known. The advice that I would give a black child growing up today is the same advice I would give a black child growing up anywhere at any time. Do your best. You might not always succeed. Some people will appreciate and approve, and some people won't. And that's okay. Find good people, stay away from bad people, and try your hardest. Maybe there's a society somewhere where nobody cares what color your skin is. In which case I would tell you, do your best, try your hardest, maximize your potential, surround yourself with good people, ignore the bad people. What difference does it make? There's a really nice interview with Morgan Freeman, Morgan Freeman, who grew up in, I believe it was Tallahatchie, Tennessee. And he said, my response to all these discussions about racism in American society, stop talking about it. Just like that. Stop talking about it. And the guy interviewing him, Walter Cronkite, who's Jewish, says, well, how do we advance beyond it, and how do we as a society grow? And he said, just stop talking about it. Because the more you talk about it, the more reality you give it, the more press it gets. Same reaction I heard, by the way, about Yimach Zichro, Dieudonné in France. Everybody was saying, so you have this black guy who used to have a Jewish sidekick, they were comedians, whatever it was, something went sour, I don't know what happened. And then he became really, really crazy and a neo-Nazi, and he started saying all sorts of crazy things. He was looking for attention. And people were saying, why do we even care what he says? Why do we even care? Why do we shine a spotlight on him and give him the microphone? Because when you do that, he used to put out these YouTube rants every week and make all sorts of funny jokes. And he developed a following. When in reality, if you just pull the plug, if you just stop talking to him, stop listening to him, stop looking at him, he goes away. He becomes irrelevant. And they got him on taxes and something else. But the idea, Morgan Freeman was saying, and this is a guy who's in his 70s right now, and he's been through a lot. Morgan Freeman? The actor? Not that I know. But Adam. Right. Right. He narrated the March of the Penguins. So that was cool. Anyway, so 79. There you go. He was almost 80. And he grew up in the segregated South. And here's a guy who has a lot to teach us about, adversity in life. He became very wealthy and very famous and very influential. And his response to all of it, by the way, I think his third wife is white, so apparently race doesn't play much by him. So his response to all of it was just stop talking about it. The more you talk about it, the more of a phenomenon you're creating. Does he mean to say there are no racist people alive anymore? No. Just stop talking to them. Stop talking about them. Focus on achievements and accomplishments, and stop telling young black kids you can't succeed in life because someone's keeping you down. There's a reason. There's an excuse. You can check out if you want, because the fact that there are some racist people somewhere is going to give you an excuse for the rest of your life not to try your hardest. It really, as a matter of fact, is a great example of a very deep Kabbalistic concept that just happens to be so true that even on the Pshat level, it makes sense. So people tried to focus David HaMelech's entire life on what happened with Bathsheba. The Gemara says, to the day he died, people were laughing at him and saying, David, a man who has relations with a married woman, what's his capital punishment? King of Israel. And his response was, he's punished by Chenek, but he has a portion of the world to come. Somebody who humiliates someone in public, on the contrary, has no portion of the world to come. So if you really want to split hairs, we can go there too. But that's the idea. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. I'm not saying it's not unfair and unjust. It is. But talking about it makes it worse. Focusing on it makes it worse. Telling kids from the beginning that they can't succeed and here's why, they never will succeed. And they'll have you and this phenomenon to blame.
So, 2 points. One is, how do we then, what about the fact that when you talk about the Holocaust and what happened there, because we choose to remember it better to kind of put it behind us.
Excellent question.
Number 2 is, with regard to what you were saying about, not defining things to not give them life. I think, isn't that kind of like our very innate human tendency and kind of like part of why we're honored? Like the first thing that Adam does is to give a name to things. So I think a lot of people, let's say, would say that, once somebody knows that they have, let's say, ADHD, depression, whatever these things are, it lets them know that, they're not the only person in this world who has this problem, and that they can also overcome it.
Right. So 2 things. Number 1, guys, see what happens. You'll come to Shiur for a few months and someone else asks all the bombshell questions. So regarding the Holocaust, are you familiar with anybody who recommended we should talk about it less?
There are other things.
And Jews, not Jean-Marie Le Pen.
I think actually it's really
real people.
Like people position that.
Huh? She's great. Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, the son of Abraham Yitzhak Cohen Kook, the famous religious Zionist, the great granddaddy of the religious Zionist movement.
Right.
He himself once wrote in a letter that I think it was about taking kids to see the camps in Poland, like the March of the Living. His response to this was focusing a discussion and focusing our history on the Holocaust is not only going to help us resurrect, a formerly weak and struggling nation. He said it actually has the power to kill it. He was criticized for saying it, but his point was this. Ask you a question. If another Holocaust were to happen today in America, do you really think there's anything we can do to stop it? If the entire culture were to go sour, for whatever reason, some prominent Jew did something stupid and everybody all of a sudden starts attacking Jews, do you really think we can change this?
I think there is a certain amount of things we can change. Well, one is we can have a state of Israel, but two is, part of the thing was we have in our mentality sometimes that there's nothing that can be done to change it. So if you put it in people's mind, okay, like if we get to this juncture, like I will fight for myself and my family, I will just
Defend yourself at all costs.
right.
And fight to the death if you have to.
Yeah.
Do you think the world has changed significantly since the Holocaust?
Yeah.
Let me throw some keywords at you. Yazidis, Christians, Kurds, ISIS, Daesh. Like, you really think anybody cares? Somalia, Sudan.
Right.
The same thing, Bosnia, right? The 300,000 people were killed before, and that's like in Sweden's backyard, and Switzerland's backyard. So in the heart of Europe, I don't think anything has changed. I don't think any of the human tendencies, the fundamental human tendencies have changed. I don't think there's much of a point in talking about it. If you want to talk about our nation at its weakest possible point, it'd be like telling somebody, man, I remember back in high school how depressed you were and suicidal,
I mean, that's like the modern day Pesach story, basically.
Pesach's only a happy story because the ending was happy for 20% of us. But, it worked out great and here we are.
Right. So
You say something with Purim, there are happy aspects to it. But talking about the Holocaust is basically saying, you're diving into dangerous, deep waters there. Why do punishments like that happen? To what extent can you say this was an active, direct punishment or a kind of indirect sort of punishment? And what could we do to prevent it or to stop it? If it's something that happened by divine fiat, it could happen again tomorrow. Focus on all the good and positive things that you can do. Here's the thing, if you focus a lot on the negativity and the loss and the anguish and the despair, it leads you to those places. And you get stuck there. It is what it is. You literally go to these places, you get stuck. I had a first cousin once removed, she was a social worker. She dealt with very difficult situations, a lot of abused women, some that were working on the street. Tough situations. As a woman, she identified and she tried to help, and she ended up snapping. But she moved to Japan and she flipped out. She couldn't do it. It's not uncommon in mental health. People do that. So you want to help someone, you don't necessarily need to dive into those depths in order to get them out. On the contrary, you're more helpful to them if you come from a place of sanity and you can reach, extend a hand to them. But to every time you're talking to someone in a difficult situation, you talk about it and you bring it up, it doesn't help. Another good example of this would be Avilut. The Gemara says, during the Shiva, someone passed away, you're sitting Shiva, so we eulogize, we speak of the great nature of the person who passed away, the good things they did, and we kind of magnify the loss. We want to focus on the loss. The next 30 days are really more for the mourner, him or herself, than they are for the deceased. So, it's a shame, but we want them to get up from the Shiva and go back to work. You kind of ease your way back into the routine. The Gemara says that trying to offer condolences after 30 days is like a doctor saying, you want to see how talented I am? Here, I'll break your arm and I'll put it back together for you. Why? I don't need to go into the whole, I've cried my eyes out. I've been through it. I know. Father, mother, whatever, it's a difficult situation, it's tough, and I'm getting over it. You don't need to be dragged back into it. You don't need someone to go heavy on the condolences at that point. It is what it is. I got through it. And we can move on and talk about more positive things. But, look, at the end of the day, the Gemara does give us a halacha like this. You heard this expression? When you have a funeral procession going one way and a marriage procession going the other, who stops before whom? The Gemara says we always give deference to the kala over the deceased, and that's a philosophy. It's not just a technical halacha. That's if I have to decide between letting these people continue their mourning uninterrupted or allowing the Hatan and Kala to celebrate their special, happy, holy day uninterrupted, where this is the beginning of life, it's the foundation of life, we're going to favor the Hatan and Kala, and that's the idea. We always cut a bit short.
Is it the same for attendance? If at the same time you're supposed to go to a funeral and a wedding?
That's
wedding?
There, it's not so simple. It might depend where your presence is more needed. As a rabbi, there's always tough decisions to make. Usually funerals are in the morning, weddings in the afternoon. Normally, my personal approach to this is wherever I think I leave a bigger hole, is where I try to go. People need you more desperately when they're going through tough times. Usually at a wedding, they're so elated, they're so excited that it doesn't make a big difference. But then if you're officiating the wedding, if they want you to be there, then sometimes you have to go. So, and then it's a violent transition also from one to the other. But there's a pasuk in Kohelet where Shlomo Melech recommends, if you have the opportunity to go to the house of a Hatan or to the house of a mourner, go to the house of the mourner. You'll have more to learn there. Meaning, it gives you more of a perspective on life. There is something intoxicating about simcha that's, you got married once. I mean, your life isn't one long wedding day. There are other things. You have bills to pay. You have a mother-in-law. It's not the same. So the ubiquitous mother-in-law. It's either the politicians or her. I don't know what to tell you. So, simcha can't go on forever. But at the same time, we really do focus. Another quick example of this. We should move on. We always cut the Shiva short. You familiar with this? Really, Shiva means 7 days, right? There's always going to be a Shabbat in there somewhere. Except that we hold Miqsat Hayom Kechulo. A little bit into the day, it's as if you sat the whole day. So on the 7th day of the Shiva, we don't wait until the sunset. Ashkenazim, Sephardim, Zechanim. We let the sun rise, you pray, whatever, you go home, and then we kind of push you out of the route. It should be 7 days, but we chip away at it. We're stingy with it. Because we don't want you to spend too much time there. It's not good for the nefesh. It's true. It's halakha. It's really good. So we'll continue from here next week. I don't want to ruin the surprise, but we're going to kill Adonia, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Take a quick 2-minute breather, and we'll do a quick midrash on this week's Rosh Hashanah.